Now I need to talk about the biggest issue I have with this game as of right now, which is the tutorial. You start off in this weird church that is just put onto a relatively small part of land, high up in the air, that's also completely separated from the rest of the map, I think. There's actually some good stuff here, like the view, the scenery of the Erdtree and the clouds is super awesome. And the Chapel of Anticipation, which is this very first location, does look pretty great. I especially admire the wind that's present in this. It's a very fine detail, but it goes a long way to making the whole place look much more epic. And then we get to this very first boss, which is one of these creepy puppet things with the multiple arms and legs. They're called Crafted Scions. And the first thing I thought when I saw this boss was, this reminds me of that one creepy spider doll cyborg from Toy Story. And indeed, they do seem a bit similar, I think. Yeah, the boss looks very awesome. The arena you fight him in does too. If you look around, you can see that the trees are very strongly bent to the right because of the strong wind present in this area. And there also is this large statue of Queen Marika, which looks very cool. So far for the positives. Now it gets a bit weird. When the boss dropped down and screamed at me, as hyped as I was super down to destroy this guy. And as you can maybe see in the footage, I got completely wrecked. And then the game awkwardly cuts to black. And then we wake up in this stone cave to start the actual tutorial. This already feels very wrong. The way you transition from this super epic first area, fighting a very cool boss, to that underground place, completely kills the momentum and the energy that you build up in the Chapel of Anticipation. That's actually funny. It's even in the name. Yeah, the transition is very abrupt. Like the boss music just straight up stops, and we go to a totally different location with a much calmer atmosphere. At this point, I already felt a bit puzzled as to what I just saw even meant. Were we just somehow brought here by someone? How the hell did we get down here? What happened between us fighting the boss and you waking up here? I think they could have done a much better job at handling all of that, to make it seem less random and disconnected. Honestly guys, did any one of you not feel even just a bit lost and confused when that transition was happening? It's super weird to me. So here we pick up our 2 flasks and now we get to the tutorial cave. We activate the first Site of Grace and then kill these weak hollow enemies. The instructions on fighting and all the other stuff is fine. I don't have any particular issue with all of that stuff. But then we get a bit further into the cave and there's one part with some bushes, plants and even some trees. This feels pretty out of place in this cave, and the fog also doesn't help. I'm pretty sure you understand what I mean. This entire spot feels very artificially placed into the cave, just so we can pick up our first berries. Plus, you now encounter some of these Godric soldiers, which also feels highly out of place. Seconds ago, we fought some hollow zombie creatures, and now you have these guys just chilling out in this weird cave, shooting at you with crossbows and fighting you with swords, shields and spears. And after walking through a more normal looking part of the cave, stone and stuff, we again get to a spot full of extremely green bushes. This is just very odd. Why would this cave have these super randomly fertile spots filled with bushes and plants that are also very clearly separated from the rest of the cave, which is just cold stone with no plants whatsoever? This second green spot is only here so the player can try to sneak through all of the very conveniently dense bushes to then sneak up on the enemies. So far, I must say that this tutorial doesn't feel very natural. The cave isn't at all trying to hide the fact that it very clearly functions as a tutorial for the game's main mechanics. And therefore, it ends up being highly artificial rather than an actual part of the game's world that the player fights their way through. But we're not done yet, unfortunately. So you go through the fog wall, and then you fight another one of these regular Godric soldiers as a sort of mini-boss. He's pretty easy to beat. He does the same attacks as the normal soldiers, just with a bigger health bar. At this point, I was very doubtful as to what the game was doing. This is by far the worst boss in the game, if you can even call it that. I know it only functions as a tutorial, but I couldn't help but feel completely disconnected from the game right from the get-go. This entire cave level is super strange to me. There's very little sense of continuity or connectedness to the following part of the cave. Again, why would Godric soldiers just randomly hang out in this underground cave? I just realized that almost all my issues with Elden Ring are elements that tend more towards gamification rather than immersion. And this is a large general issue I notice in most games. I'm really not a big fan of game developers making certain compromises in terms of the consistency of the world or the characters of a game, simply because it's a game. Compared to the rest of the game, this tutorial clearly is not very good, because of all the reasons I just mentioned. And the fact that it's skippable does help a little bit, but then again, most people will go through the tutorial just due to the desire of exploring the game and getting to see everything. And the first part at the chapel with that very clumsy and totally off-putting transition of course is not skippable, which, I don't know. I just cannot help but think that From Software could have done a much better job with all of this. And they absolutely should have, because this makes up the first 30 to 40 minutes of the player's experience, which is kind of a big deal.